This is his picture of the world. Where do we then fit in it? Augustine believes that every part of the world has its proper function, its proper place. The world was created ordered in a particular way. And because it's ordered, it is beautiful. Beauty, for Augustine, is in part and parcel with order. A passage that I find particularly important for Augustine is at the end of Book 1, on page 40, chapter 20, the very bottom line. And here we're getting to the notion of how ought we to behave for Augustine. The ethical question. He says, "But my sin was this, that I looked for pleasure, beauty, and truth, not in him, but in myself and his other creatures. And the search led me instead to pain, confusion, and error." Notice the two triads there. He looks for pleasure, beauty, and truth, but he gets pain, confusion, and error. Pleasure and pain. Truth and error. Beauty and confusion. Why confusion? Because for Augustine, beauty was a matter of order, properly ordered relationships. Disorder or confusion is evil. It is a failure to be something that you ought to be. It is a failure to have a relationship that you ought to have. It is to be confused, to be out of place. And this then for Augustine becomes the nature of sin and is connected to his understanding of evil as the absence of good in Book 7. What we ought to do, what we have been created to do, he says in Book 1, Chapter 1, we have been created to praise God. Our function, our role, our place is given to us in our creation. This is not like John Stuart Mill. For Mill, the good life is something that you get to choose for yourself. You ought to be free, at liberty, to decide how you live your life. Just don't harm anybody else. But apart from that, the good life is the freedom to choose to be what you want, to choose your own plan of life, your experiment in living. That is totally opposed to Augustine's understanding of the good life. We have been created to praise God. We fill a particular place within the created order. The order that one sees hierarchically in front of you on that piece of paper. Our function is to look above us to God. But if instead we look for pleasure, beauty, and truth, not in God, but in ourselves and in the world below us, then the result is pain, confusion, and error. We fall. We become disordered souls. We sin. And as a result, we wander far from God in a land of unlikeness. We become the prodigal sons who are journeying, trying to find something to satisfy our need for God. We've been created with the capacity to love God. When we turn from God, what we find instead are finite things that have no ability to satisfy. And so, as he says in chapter 1, we cannot be content unless we praise you, because you made us for ourselves, and our hearts find no peace, no rest, until they rest in you. So Augustine's understanding of life, of the world, of our lives, because this is a story about all people. It's about you as well as Augustine. He uses his life to illustrate it, but fundamentally it is the story of every person, fallen, living in a world separated from God, wandering. We are born, we wake up, he says in book 1. We wake up already in sin. And then we wander this world trying to find what will satisfy that innate, built-in desire for God. But we look in the wrong places. And we, as a result, we find something that gives us pleasure, but it doesn't satisfy. And we keep grasping and searching. There's a great passage that brings this out that you won't read. So I'm going to take you to it right now, so you will read it. Book 13. Here, what we need to understand is that the importance of love for Augustine's Confessions. I don't know if you've noticed, I don't know if your professors have drawn it to your attention, but throughout the text, he is looking for love. He says it at the beginning of book 2. He says it again at the beginning of book 3. That he desires to love and to be loved. Love is the key to the dynamic movement of Augustine's world. It's a matter of desire. And we either love the world and try to attach ourselves to it, or we love God. In book 13, chapter 10, the very end of the first paragraph, we'll start there. He says, "It is your gift, in your gift, that we find our rest." Rest is the good life, the point of life. That is where we are when we are in our proper place. We are at rest. "It is in Him that we enjoy you. The place where we find rest is the rightful one for us. To it we are raised by love, to which your Spirit lifts us up, lowly creatures as we are, from the gate of death. It is in goodness of will that we find your peace, our peace." And then he gives an analogy. And the analogy makes sense once you see this ontology, his understanding of reality in front of you. He says, "A body inclines by its own weight towards the place that is fitting for it. Weight does not always tend towards the lowest place, but the one which suits it best. For though a stone falls, flame rises. Each thing acts according to its weight, finding its right level. If oil is poured into water, it rises to the surface. But if water is poured onto oil, it sinks below the oil. This happens because each acts according to its weight, finding its right level. When things are displaced, they are always on the move until they come to rest where they are meant to be. In my case, love is the weight by which I act." There were 4 basic elements: earth, water, air, and fire. And according to ancient Greek physics, each has its proper weight. Why is it that you throw a stone up, Aristotle thought, it falls to the ground? Because that is the place that is right for it. That is where it is by nature. Flame, he says, if you point it down, it will, as a matter of nature, move back up. Because that's where it belongs. Everything seeks its proper place. Everything seeks to rest, to come to rest.